Well, welcome back into the Mid-Norfolk vegetable garden here, and today we're just going to be showing you the fan training that we've done for these Tayberry vines that we showed you earlier on in the season in fruit. Now we'll put a card up just giving you a link to that video because you may not be familiar with Tayberries. We were surprised when we first did the video how few people had actually heard of them or grown them. And Tayberry is a very similar fruit to a raspberry, if you can imagine an overgrown, slightly elongated, sharpish raspberry. Tayberries grow on these vines and they fruit on the previous season's growth, which tends to be extremely vigorous when they get going. And what we have along here is probably between 7 and 8 Tayberry vines. This is the base of one of those vines, complete with thistle and bindweed coming up behind it. This is a real garden after all, not a demonstration one. But you can see how woody and quite thistly these are. Just look at the thorns on these things. Those are the old growths that have been cut out. Those were last season's growth and fruiting spurs, and the fresh growth that's come up this year initially grows outwards and procumbently runs all throughout this vegetable garden. So what we've done is shorten these and tie them in against these wires. Now if you only had one Tayberry vine growing and you wanted to maximize your fruit, then you could run these laterally along these wires for as long as you can get a healthy growth without any damage on it, and you would get a lot more fruit if you were to do that. But because of the number of vines that we've got growing here, we tend to train these straight up and cut them off at the top, and then you'll see them starting to try and grow away and shoot already. That will just die back later in this season. But what we will do is get every leaf joint these vines will break next season, and that's where you'll get the fruit forming and your next crop of Tayberries. So we've tied all these in, cut out any unrequired vines that we don't require. Oh great, somebody's come to the gate. And it's the same for this Loganberry, which is very similar to Tayberry to grow, but we've done exactly the same technique here. Shorten the vines, tied them in so they're on the vertical, and removed any unrequired vines that are surplus to the space that the vine's growing into. So we've covered this wall in those vines. What you will find, if these touch down on the soil for any length of time, they'll root in. It's very easy to propagate these plants, and if you want to increase your numbers you can do so quite quickly by just either pinning down or digging in any of these vines as they're sitting on the surface and just leaving there. Over a course of about 8 weeks they will root, and you can just separate those from the parent plants, and you've got a new Tayberry plant ready to go away, and it will even fruit in its first season. In fact, we've got an example of that here. These two plants, this one and this one, were both propagated last year just by allowing the vines to touch down on the surface of this soil, and then we separated them as soon as we could see some root coming, and you'll see we've got young plants coming and growing away there. They are probably going to be moved or given away to people because they are far too close to the existing plants that we've got, which the main plant is just there. So these are only about 2 feet apart, and there's not going to be enough wall space to adequately allow good air circulation between even the vertical tied in plants on this wall. So they will be dug up, potted up and given to somebody that would like a Tayberry. That really wasn't very helpful. Thanks.